The stars had always been a source of wonder for humanity. Children looked up at the night sky and dreamed of distant worlds. Scientists pointed their telescopes toward the heavens and searched for signs of life. Writers imagined fantastic adventures among the planets and galaxies. For thousands of years, humans believed that when they finally met beings from other worlds, it would be a moment of joy and discovery. They were wrong. The Dominion of arrived on a cold morning in December of 2157. Their ships appeared without warning, blocking out the sun over every major city on Earth. There were thousands of them, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They hung in the sky like dark mountains, silent and terrible. Admiral was 32 years old when the invasion began. She stood on the deck of the naval carrier USS Washington and watched the alien vessels descend through the clouds. Her crew looked to her for orders, but what orders could she give? Their missiles were like toys compared to the weapons that now pointed down at every nation on Earth. They broadcast their message in every human language. Their voices were cold and mechanical, translated by machines that had learned to speak like humans long before they arrived. People of Earth, you are now subjects of the Dominion of. Your governments will surrender all authority. Your militaries will disband. Your resources belong to us. Resistance will result in extinction. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. Some nations tried to fight. Russia launched its nuclear arsenal. The missiles rose toward the alien ships and then simply stopped in midair. They hung frozen for a moment before falling back to Earth, their warheads disabled by technology humans could not understand. China sent its entire air force against the invaders. The planes were swatted from the sky like insects. The United States fired everything it had. Nothing worked. Within 3 days, every major military on Earth had been destroyed. Within 2 weeks, every government had surrendered. They did not negotiate because they did not need to. They were so far beyond humanity in technology and power that fighting them was like ants fighting against a giant. Admiral watched her carrier sink beneath the waves of the Pacific Ocean. She had given the order to scuttle the ship herself rather than let it fall into enemy hands. As she floated in the cold water, waiting for rescue that might never come, she made a promise to herself. This was not the end. Humanity would find a way. They always found a way. They were not cruel in the way humans understood cruelty. They did not torture or murder for pleasure. They simply did not care. To them, humans were useful animals, nothing more. Earth became a mining operation, a factory, a source of labor. Humans were put to work extracting metals and minerals. They built machines for their new masters. They grew food to feed colonies on distant worlds. The Dominion of was made up of 12 species, all of them ancient and powerful. They had conquered hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. They had been building their empire for 10,000 years. Humanity was just the latest addition to their collection. Life under rule was not unbearable for most people. As long as humans worked and obeyed, they were allowed to live in relative peace. They could have families. They could practice their religions. They could even maintain some of their old customs and traditions. They did not care about human culture. They only cared about productivity. But there were those who remembered what freedom had felt like. There were those who looked up at the alien ships patrolling the skies and felt a fire burning in their hearts. There were those who refused to accept that humanity's story would end this way. Admiral was one of them. After the invasion, she disappeared. The records showed that she had died when her carrier sank. In truth, she had been rescued by a small boat and taken to a secret location in the mountains of Norway. There, she found others like herself, military officers who had faked their deaths, scientists who had gone into hiding, engineers who had escaped the work camps. They called themselves the Remnant. For the first 5 years after the invasion, the Remnant did nothing but survive and plan. They established hidden bases in places they would not think to look, deep underground bunkers, abandoned mines, underwater facilities that could only be reached by submarine. They gathered information and studied their enemy. What they learned gave them hope. They were powerful, but they were also arrogant. They believed that humanity was completely broken. They did not bother to search for resistance movements because they were certain none could exist. They left large portions of Earth unmonitored because they saw no reason to watch over a conquered species. More importantly, the remnant discovered something that they did not know, something that had been hidden from the invaders, something that could change everything. 20 years before they arrived, a deep space observation station had detected something strange at the edge of the solar system. Beyond Neptune, in the cold darkness where the sun was just another star, there was an object that should not exist. It was massive, larger than Earth's moon, but it gave off no heat and reflected no light. It was completely invisible to normal detection methods. The scientists who found it called it the Shadow Gate. Humanity's governments had sent secret missions to investigate. What they found was beyond anything they could have imagined. The Shadow Gate was a structure built by beings who had lived and died before Earth even existed. It was ancient beyond measure, and it was a doorway. The scientists could not activate the gate. They did not have the technology or the knowledge, but they could study it. They could learn from it. And in those 20 years before the invasion, humanity's greatest minds had begun to unlock its secrets. When they arrived, all records of the Shadow Gate were destroyed. The scientists who knew about it were hidden away. The secret was buried so deep that no amount of torture or interrogation could reveal it. They never knew that humanity had found something more advanced than even their technology. Admiral learned about the Shadow Gate in the 3rd year of the occupation. A dying scientist, one of the original researchers, passed the information to the remnant. She told them about the dimensional folding, about the hidden spaces that existed alongside normal reality, about the possibility of building things in places that technically did not exist. The Admiral understood immediately. This was how humanity would fight back. The plan took shape over the following years. It was not a plan for quick revenge or desperate resistance. It was a plan that would take decades to complete. A plan that required patience beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. They would build a fleet, not on Earth where they would see it, not in space where sensors would detect it. They would build it in the shadow dimensions, in the folded spaces that the Shadow Gate could access. They would construct shipyards in places that did not exist by normal physics. They would work in secret for as long as it took. Construction began in the 10th year of the occupation. Deep beneath the ice of Antarctica, humans dug a massive cavern. They told thee it was a mining operation. In truth, it was a gateway to the shadow dimensions. Using technology reverse-engineered from the Shadow Gate, they opened small doorways to hidden spaces and began to build. Other sites were established around the world. Under the Pacific Ocean, so deep that no probe would ever reach it. Inside dormant volcanoes in remote islands. Beneath the deserts of Africa and the mountains of Asia. Each site looked like a normal human settlement or work camp on the surface. Below, they were doorways to humanity's secret hope. Admiral oversaw the construction herself. She was getting older now, her hair turning gray, but her mind was as sharp as ever. She recruited engineers and scientists from all over the world. She found workers who could be trusted to keep the secret. She built a network of spies and informants who could warn them if they ever grew suspicious. The work was slow. Building in the shadow dimensions was dangerous and difficult. The physics there did not always work the same way as in normal space. Accidents happened, people died, but they never stopped. The first ship was completed in the 20th year of the occupation. They called it the Prometheus, after the ancient god who brought fire to humanity. It was a kilometer long, larger than any vessel humans had ever built. Its engines ran on principles they had never discovered. Its weapons could tear through shields that were supposed to be unbreakable. When Admiral first walked onto the bridge of the Prometheus, she wept. She was an old woman now, past 60, but she had never stopped fighting. Looking out at the strange stars of the shadow dimension, she knew that humanity had a chance. More ships followed. Defiance, Remembrance, Fury, Silent Oath. Each one took years to build, but the shipyards kept growing. More workers joined the effort. Children born after the invasion grew up in the hidden facilities, learning to build and fight. They had never known freedom, but they dreamed of it with a passion their parents had never felt. By the 40th year of the occupation, the fleet had grown to over 100 ships. Still not enough to challenge the directly, but it was a beginning. Admiral knew she might not live to see the final battle, but she prepared everything so that others could take her place. She created a network of sleeper agents on the surface. Humans who worked for who appeared to be loyal collaborators, but who were actually spies for the remnant. They gathered information about ship movements, about the location of their supply lines, about the weaknesses in their defenses. One of these agents was a young man named Elias Vance. He was born in the 5th year of the occupation, in a work camp in what used to be Brazil. He never knew his father, who had died in a mining accident. His mother raised him to be quiet and obedient, to never attract attention from the overseers. But she also taught him to remember. Every night before he went to sleep, she would whisper stories about the old world, about a time when humans were free, about heroes who fought against impossible odds. She told him that one day things would change, that he had to be ready. When Elias was 15, a woman approached him. She said she was a recruiter for a special work program. In truth, she was a remnant operative. She saw something in the boy, a fire that he kept hidden behind his quiet eyes. Elias trained for 5 years. He learned to fight, to spy, to deceive. He learned about the Shadow Gate and the Hidden Fleet. He learned about the plan that had been building for decades. And when his training was complete, he was sent back to the surface as a sleeper agent. For the next 20 years, Elias Vance lived a double life. On the surface, he was a model citizen, a collaborator who helped them manage their human workforce. He rose through the ranks, becoming a labor coordinator for the South American sector. They trusted him completely. They never knew that every report he filed contained hidden codes. Every shipment he logged fed information back to the remnant. Every promotion brought him closer to the secrets the resistance needed to know. The 60th year of the occupation arrived. Admiral was 92 years old. Her body was failing, but her mind remained clear. She sat in her command center deep beneath the Antarctic ice and reviewed the reports from her agents. The fleet now numbered over 4,000 ships, massive dreadnoughts, fast attack cruisers, carriers loaded with fighter craft, support vessels of every kind. They filled the shadow dimensions like stars in a hidden sky. 3 generations of humans had worked to build them. 3 generations of sacrifice and secrecy. That was complete. This was the key to everything. A single ship with one purpose: to open the Shadow Gate fully, to tear a hole in reality large enough for the entire fleet to pour through, to bring humanity's hidden army into normal space. Admiral called her senior officers together. They came from all over the world, traveling through secret passages to the Antarctic Command Center, men and women who had given their lives to this cause. Some of them had been children when she first began the plan. "It is time," she said. Her voice was weak, but her words carried the weight of 60 years of preparation. "We have built something impossible. We have hidden in the shadows while our people suffered. We have watched and waited while they grew comfortable. Now we show them what humanity is capable of." She looked at the faces around her, young and old, strong and weary, all of them ready. "Send the signal." The message went out through hidden channels that they could not detect. It reached sleeper agents on every continent. It traveled to secret bases on the moon and hidden stations in the asteroid belt. 3 short pulses, 1 long. The old Earth Navy code for execute. Elias Vance received the signal on a gray morning in Lagos. He was sitting in his office, reviewing reports on human labor productivity. When his terminal beeped with the coded message, his heart nearly stopped. He had been waiting for this moment for 20 years. Part of him had started to believe it would never come, but here it was, the signal he had trained for, the order he had dreamed about. His hands trembled as he began to shut down his systems. Across the planet, 7,000 other sleeper agents were doing the same thing. Workers were abandoning their posts. Power grids were going dark. Communications were being scrambled. High Overseer, the commander responsible for Earth, watched the reports coming in with growing confusion. Humans were leaving their jobs by the millions. Entire cities were going offline. It looked like some kind of coordinated protest. He was not worried. He had dealt with human unrest before. A few examples would be made. A few troublemakers would be executed. Order would be restored. Humans were weak. They always broke eventually. He was still thinking this when the ocean off the coast of Chile began to boil. Admiral, watching through satellite feeds that they had never known she could access, smiled for the first time in years. The Pacific hidden base was opening its doors. The ships that had waited in darkness for decades were rising toward the light. The moment had finally come. Humanity was done waiting. The water rose in a massive dome, pushed upward by something enormous rising from below. Steam poured into the air as heat from the ascending vessel boiled the cold Pacific waters. Fishermen on nearby boats stared in shock. Patrol drones circled in confusion, their sensors unable to identify what they were seeing. Then the HSS Prometheus broke the surface. The ship was a kilometer long, its hull dark gray and covered with strange patterns that seemed to shift when you looked at them. It rose from the ocean like a god emerging from the deep. Water poured off its massive form as it climbed higher and higher into the sky. Its engines glowed with a light that was not quite natural, a soft blue that seemed to bend the air around it. For a moment, everything was silent. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then the alarms began. Command centers across the planet lit up with warnings. Unknown vessel detected. Energy signature unrecognized. Size, massive. Origin, unknown. The messages flooded in from every monitoring station on Earth. High Overseer stood in his command tower in what used to be Geneva and stared at the holographic display before him. His compound eyes, dozens of small lenses clustered together, could not process what he was seeing. A human ship. Impossible. They had been disarmed 60 years ago. Every factory was monitored. Every resource was tracked. How could they have built something like this? Where did it come from? He demanded. His voice was a harsh clicking sound that the translation devices turned into words. The ocean, High Overseer, one of his subordinates reported. It appears to have risen from deep beneath the water. That tells me nothing. How was it built? How was it hidden? No one had an answer. Before could give orders, another alert came in. A second ship was rising from the Pacific, then a third, then a fourth. The display showed more signals appearing every second. Across the world, the same thing was happening. Ships rose from the depths of the Atlantic Ocean. They emerged from beneath the ice of Antarctica. They burst out of hidden caverns in remote mountains. They dropped from secret bases on the dark side of the moon. The Prometheus was joined by her sister ships. Defiance broke through the clouds over the Indian Ocean, her weapons already powered and ready. Remembrance rose from a hidden base beneath the Sahara Desert, shaking off sand and rock as she climbed. Fury and Silent Oath emerged together from a cavern system in the Andes Mountains. Commander Elias Vance watched the ships appear through a window in the Lagos administrative building. He had worked in this building for 15 years. He had lied and deceived and pretended to be a loyal servant of for 2 decades. Now, finally, he could stop pretending. Other sleeper agents were revealing themselves across the city. They disabled security systems. They opened locked doors. They freed prisoners from holding cells. The careful work of 20 years was paying off in a single day. Vance made his way through the chaos to a hidden transport pod. It would take him to a rendezvous point where a shuttle was waiting. His work on the surface was done. Now he would join the fleet that he had helped to create. High Overseer watched the tactical display with growing horror. 47 human capital ships were now visible, spread across Earth's sky. 200 smaller vessels accompanied them. Where had they come from? How had humans built them without detection? He opened a communication channel to the Dominion High Council, the governing body of all 12 species. His report was frantic, his usual calm shattered by panic. They have a fleet. The humans have a fleet. This is not possible. I repeat, this is not possible. We need reinforcements immediately. The Council's response was swift. A battle group was stationed at a base near Mars. 300 warships, more than enough to crush this unexpected rebellion. They were ordered to Earth immediately. Felt some of his confidence return. These human ships were impressive, but they were still outnumbered. They had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had crushed rebellions before. This would be no different. He broadcast a message to the human fleet on all frequencies. His voice was cold and commanding, the voice of a master speaking to disobedient servants. Attention, human vessels. You have violated the terms of your surrender. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Your crews will be taken into custody. Examples will be made. If you do not comply within 1 hour, the surface of Earth will be sterilized. All human life will be ended. You have brought this upon yourselves. Aboard the HSS Prometheus, Admiral listened to the transmission. She sat in the command chair on the bridge, surrounded by officers who had been born after the invasion. They had never known freedom. They had trained their entire lives for this moment. The Admiral was very old now. Her body was frail and her movements were slow. But her eyes burned with the same fire that had kept her fighting for 60 years. She looked at the faces of her crew, young men and women who were counting on her to lead them to victory. "Open a response channel," she said. "All frequencies." The communications officer nodded. "Channel open, Admiral." Stood slowly, pushing herself up from her chair. She faced the main, which showed the command tower far below. "High Overseer, this is Admiral of the Human Reclamation Fleet. 60 years ago, your people came to our world. You destroyed our cities. You killed millions of our people. You told us that resistance was extinction." She paused, letting her words carry across the planet. "You were right, but you misunderstood who would go extinct." On the surface, humans everywhere stopped what they were doing. The broadcast was playing on every screen, every speaker, every device. For the first time in 60 years, they heard a human voice speaking with authority, speaking without fear. "For 60 years we have waited," the Admiral continued. "We have worked in your factories. We have mined your metals. We have bowed and scraped and pretended to be broken. But we were never broken. We were building. And now our work is complete." Watched the broadcast with rage building in his chest. This old human woman dared to threaten the Dominion. Did she not understand the power she was facing? "You have 47 ships," he responded. "We have 300 warships approaching from Mars. Your rebellion will be crushed. Your species will be punished." Admiral smiled. It was a strange smile, sad and triumphant at the same time. "You think we have 47 ships? Oh, High Overseer, we have so much more than that." She turned to her tactical officer. "Is the in position?" "Yes, Admiral, ready on your command." Looked out at the stars. Somewhere beyond Neptune, the Shadow Gate waited. Ancient and silent, it had been dormant since before humanity existed. But they had learned its secrets. They had unlocked its power. And now they would use it. "Open the gate." There was a strange ship, smaller than the warships but covered with equipment that made no sense to human eyes. It had been designed for one purpose only: to activate the Shadow Gate, to tear open the barrier between normal space and the shadow dimensions. The ship powered up its main system. Energy surged through conduits that followed patterns from the ancient structure beyond Neptune. The air around them began to shimmer and twist. Far out in the darkness of space, the Shadow Gate began to wake. It had been dormant for longer than humanity could imagine. Billions of years had passed since its creators had used it last. Dust and ice covered its surface. Its systems had been sleeping, waiting for someone to call upon them again. Now they answered. The gate was larger than Earth's moon, a ring of impossible metal floating in the darkness. Light began to glow along its edges, soft at first but growing brighter. The dust burned away. The ice melted into vapor. The ancient machinery rumbled back to life. On the Prometheus, every sensor went wild. Energy readings spiked beyond anything the instruments could measure. Space itself seemed to vibrate with power. "Gate activation in progress," the tactical officer reported. "Power levels rising. We're getting feedback across all dimensions." Admiral gripped the arms of her chair. This was the moment everything had been building toward. 60 years of preparation, 3 generations of sacrifice, all of it came down to this. How long until full activation? 90 seconds, Admiral. The reinforcement fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Mars. 300 warships, each one bristling with weapons that could glass a planet. They formed into attack formation and began moving toward Earth. Felt relief wash over him. The human fleet was impressive, but it was hopelessly outnumbered. This rebellion would be crushed, and the example would be so terrible that no human would ever dare to resist again. "Human vessels," he broadcast. "You see now the might of the Dominion. Surrender immediately or watch your world burn." Admiral did not respond. She was watching the readings from the Shadow Gate. The energy levels were still climbing. 60 seconds until full activation. The fleet moved closer, their weapons charged, targeting systems locked onto the human ships. 40 seconds. "Admiral, they are preparing to fire. Hold position, trust the plan." 20 seconds. The Shadow Gate blazed with light that was visible even from Earth. A ring of fire in the darkness, larger than anything humans had ever seen. The space inside it began to twist and fold. 10 seconds. "All ships prepare for dimensional transit," ordered. "The rest of the fleet is coming through." 5 seconds. Stared at his tactical display. Something was happening at the edge of the solar system. Energy readings were going crazy. His sensors could not make sense of what they were detecting. "What is that?" he demanded. "What is happening out there?" 0. The Shadow Gate opened. Space tore apart like fabric. A wound in reality, 1,000 kilometers wide, appeared, bleeding light that hurt to look at and darkness that seemed to swallow everything around it. The barrier between normal space and the shadow dimensions collapsed. And from within the gate, the rest of humanity's fleet emerged. Not 47 ships, not 100, not even 1,000. 4,000 vessels poured through the opening. They came in waves, ship after ship after ship, filling the space around Neptune with a swarm of metal and fire. Dreadnoughts larger than cities, carriers packed with thousands of fighters, cruisers and destroyers and frigates and support ships, an armada beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The fleet froze. Their tactical systems crashed, unable to process the data. Their commanders stared at their displays in disbelief. That's impossible," whispered. "Where did they? How did they?" Admiral watched the fleet emerge with tears in her eyes. She had dreamed of this moment for so long. So many had died to make it possible. So many had worked their entire lives in secret, never knowing if their efforts would matter. Now the dream was real. "This is Admiral to all forces," she broadcast. You asked where our ships came from. The answer is simple. We built them in places you did not know existed. We hid them in dimensions you never discovered. For 60 years, our people worked and sacrificed in secret. For 60 years, we prepared for this moment. She stood again, facing with the weight of humanity's hopes on her shoulders. You thought you knew humans. You thought we were weak. You thought we were broken. You were wrong. We are patient. We are stubborn. And we never ever give up. The hidden fleet formed into attack position. 4,000 ships, each one designed to counter technology. Each one crewed by humans who had trained their whole lives for this battle. All ships, Admiral commanded. Engage the enemy. Show them what humanity is made of. The Battle of Saul had begun. The fleet tried to respond, but they were hopelessly outmatched. Human ships moved in ways their sensors could not track. They appeared and disappeared, using the dimensional technology to strike from unexpected angles. Weapons that should have been blocked by shields cut through like they were not there. The first warship exploded in a ball of fire, then another, then another. The 300 ships that were supposed to crush the rebellion found themselves surrounded and overwhelmed. Watched his fleet dying. Ship after ship disappeared from his tactical display. The humans were not just winning, they were destroying his forces completely. How is this possible? He asked no one in particular. They are cattle, they are nothing. How is this possible? Commander Elias Vance arrived at the fleet on a shuttle launched from Earth. He was assigned to a strike team that would board the command carrier. 20 years of pretending to be a collaborator had taught him everything about their security systems. He knew their weaknesses. He knew their blind spots. As his shuttle approached the battle, he looked out at the chaos of fire and metal. Human ships danced between the lumbering vessels, striking and vanishing. The enemy fleet was already half destroyed. "We're really doing it," one of his teammates said. "We're actually beating them." Vance nodded. He thought of his mother who had died hopping for this day. He thought of all the years of waiting and pretending. He thought of every human who had suffered under rule. "This is just the beginning," he said. "By the time we're done, the whole galaxy will know that humanity is free." The battle continued to rage. They fought with desperation, but they could not match the human fleet. The Shadow Gate remained open, a doorway to the hidden dimensions where even more ships waited in reserve. Admiral watched the victory unfold from the bridge of the Prometheus. She was exhausted, but she would not rest. Not yet, not until it was finished. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving transmissions from all over Earth. Every human settlement is watching. They're cheering. They're crying. They know what's happening." Smiled. For 60 years, humanity had lived in darkness. Today, the darkness ended. "Send a message to every human on Earth," she ordered. "Tell them the Shadow Gate is open. Tell them the fleet is victorious. Tell them." She paused, searching for the right words. "Tell them they are free." The Battle of Saul raged for 11 hours. It was not really a battle at all. It was a reckoning. Human ships moved through space like ghosts. They appeared from nowhere, fired their weapons, and vanished before they could respond. Their dimensional drives allowed them to slip between layers of reality, striking from angles that should have been impossible. They had never seen anything like it. Captain commanded the HSS Fury, one of the first ships built in the shadow dimensions. She had trained on simulators for 20 years, preparing for battles she was never sure would happen. Now, finally, she was living the moment she had dreamed about. "Target the lead cruiser," she ordered. "Fire main batteries." The Fury's weapons blazed to life. Beams of concentrated energy sliced through space and struck the vessel's shields. The shields flickered for a moment, then collapsed. A second shot punched through the hull. "Direct hit. Enemy ship is breaking apart." Allowed herself a small smile. "Find the next target. We have a lot of work to do." Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships worked in perfect coordination, using tactics they had practiced for decades. They knew exactly how to fight them because they had been studying them for 60 years. Every strength, every weakness, every vulnerability had been analyzed and planned for. Though for their part, were fighting blind. Their sensors could not track ships that moved between dimensions. Their weapons could not hit targets that disappeared before the shots arrived. Their shields could not block weapons designed specifically to bypass them. High Overseer retreated to his personal command carrier, the largest and most powerful ship in the fleet. It was 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons and protected by shields that could withstand a nuclear bombardment. He believed it was invincible. He was wrong. Commander Elias Vance's strike team approached the carrier in a small shuttle. The shuttle was designed to look like a supply vessel, using codes that Vance had stolen over his 20 years as a spy. The carrier's defenses did not fire on them. "We're approaching the docking bay," the pilot reported. "No response from their security systems." Vance checked his weapon. It was a human design built to counter armor. "They still don't understand what's happening. They can't believe that we outsmarted them." The shuttle landed in the carrier's main docking bay. Soldiers rushed toward it, expecting to receive supplies or wounded crew. Instead, the shuttle's doors burst open and 50 human commandos poured out. They were not prepared for close combat with humans. Their technology was superior, but they were not warriors by nature. They were administrators, bureaucrats, rulers. They had conquered planets with overwhelming force, not with personal bravery. Vance's team moved through the carrier with brutal efficiency. They had studied the ship's layout for years. They knew every corridor, every room, every security point. The defenders fell back, unable to stop the human advance. "Main engineering is secure," one team member reported. "Weapons control is ours," another added. Vance led the assault on the bridge. The doors were locked, but he had the override codes. He had spent 15 years gathering them, one small piece at a time. The doors slid open. High Overseer stood in the center of the bridge, surrounded by his command staff. His compound eyes reflected the lights of burning ships visible through the behind him. "You," he said when he saw Vance. "I know you. You were one of our administrators, a loyal servant." Vance walked forward slowly, his weapon raised. "I was never your servant. I was a spy. Everything I did for the last 20 years was to prepare for this moment." His eyes widened with understanding. The collaborators, they were all spies. Not all of them, but enough. 7,000 sleeper agents working together for 60 years, gathering information, sending reports, waiting for the signal. The High Overseer looked out at the battle. His fleet was in ruins. Less than 50 ships remained from the 300 that had arrived from Mars. The human fleet surrounded them, closing in for the final kills. "You were cattle," he said, his voice hollow. "You were nothing." Vance smiled grimly. "We were patient." He raised his communicator. "Admiral, the enemy command ship is secure. High Overseer is in custody." There was a pause before the Admiral's voice came through. "Well done, Commander. Hold position. I'm sending a broadcast to the entire Dominion. I want him to hear it." Outside, the last warships were surrendering. Their crews, seeing that resistance was hopeless, powered down their weapons and waited to be captured. The Battle of Saul was over. Admiral sat in her command chair on the Prometheus. She was exhausted beyond measure. Every bone in her body ached, but she would not rest. Not yet. "Open a channel to the entire Dominion," she ordered. "Every frequency, every system, every world they control." "Channel open, Admiral." She took a deep breath. This message would be heard by trillions of beings across the galaxy, species that had lived under rule for thousands of years, peoples who had given up hope of ever being free. "This is Admiral of Earth. I speak to all who hear this message, whether you are human or any of the 100 species the Dominion has conquered. She paused, gathering her strength. 60 years ago, the Dominion of came to our world. They told us that we were nothing, that our only value was as workers and servants. They told us that resistance was extinction. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. We did not believe them. We could not believe them, because humans do not surrender. We do not give up. We do not accept that our story ends in slavery. Across the Dominion, beings stopped what they were doing to listen. On factory worlds where alien workers toiled under overseers. On mining colonies where slaves dug precious metals from barren rocks. On themselves, where the ruling species had grown fat and comfortable on the labor of others. For 60 years we worked in secret. We built a fleet in hidden dimensions, using technology the never knew existed. We prepared for the day when we would strike back. And today, that day has come. Admiral gestured to her tactical officer. The display changed to show the aftermath of the battle. Thousands of human ships surrounding the wreckage of the fleet. The Shadow Gate is open. Earth is free. And we make this promise to every species that has suffered under Dominion rule. If you wish to be free, humanity will stand with you. We remember what it meant to kneel. We remember what it meant to be told we were nothing. And we will never allow it to happen again. She leaned forward, her eyes burning with fierce determination. The age of the Dominion is over. The age of the free peoples has begun. The transmission ended. For a long moment the bridge of the Prometheus was silent. Then, slowly, the crew began to cheer. 60 years of fear and hiding and secret work. Now, finally, they could celebrate. But Admiral did not celebrate. She looked out at the stars and thought about all the work that remained. Defeating the Earth was only the beginning. The Dominion controlled hundreds of worlds. Billions of beings remained enslaved. The war was just starting. Admiral, her communications officer said, interrupting her thoughts. We're receiving responses to your broadcast. From the... No, ma'am, from other species. Dozens of them. They want to know if your offer is genuine. They want to know if humanity will really help them fight. Allowed herself a small smile. She had hoped for this. They had ruled through fear and power. Now that their power was broken, their subjects would turn against them. Tell them the offer is genuine. Tell them the Shadow Gate is open to all who seek freedom. Tell them humanity stands ready to fight beside them. On the command carrier, heard the Admiral's broadcast. He listened in silence as she proclaimed the end of his species' dominance. He watched the readings on the tactical displays as message after message came in from subject worlds, declaring their support for the humans. You do not understand what you have done, he said to Vance. The Dominion has kept order in this galaxy for 10,000 years. Without us, there will be chaos, wars between species, destruction on a scale you cannot imagine. Vance shrugged. Maybe, but at least it will be our chaos, our wars, our choices. That's what freedom means. The High Overseer shook his head. His compound eyes reflected the fires of his burning fleet. Freedom, such a simple word, such a complicated thing. You're right, Vance agreed. It is complicated, but it's worth fighting for. In the hours that followed, the human fleet secured the solar system. Installations on Mars and the moons of Jupiter and Saturn were captured. Collaborator governments on Earth were overthrown. Prison camps were liberated. For the first time in 60 years, humans controlled their own world. Admiral finally allowed herself to rest. She retreated to her quarters on the Prometheus and sat by the window looking out at Earth. The planet turned slowly below her, blue and green and beautiful. Her, free at last. She thought about all the people who had died to make this possible. The soldiers who fell in the initial invasion. The scientists who worked themselves to death building impossible technology. The spies who were caught and executed. The workers who died in accidents in the shadow dimensions. So many lives, so much sacrifice, and now finally it meant something. There was a knock at her door. She turned to find her chief medical officer standing in the entrance. "Admiral, you need to rest. Your vital signs are concerning." Laughed softly. "I'm 92 years old, doctor. All my vital signs are concerning." "Ma'am, please, you've done enough. Let the younger officers handle things for a while." The Admiral nodded slowly. She knew the doctor was right. Her body was failing. She had pushed herself far beyond what should have been possible. The stimulants and treatments that had kept her going were wearing off. "I'll rest," she agreed. "But first I want to see Earth one more time." She turned back to the window. The planet filled her view, a sphere of life in the darkness of space. She remembered standing on its surface as a young woman, watching the ships descend. She remembered the fear and the anger and the determination. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." Commander Vance arrived at the Prometheus the next day. He had been given a temporary promotion to captain in recognition of his service. The mission to capture the command carrier had been a complete success. He found Admiral in the ship's observation deck, looking out at the stars. She looked older than she had in her broadcast, smaller and more fragile, but her eyes were still sharp. "Commander Vance, or should I say Captain now?" Vance saluted. "Whatever you prefer, Admiral." She gestured for him to sit beside her. "You did well, 20 years under cover. That takes a special kind of strength." "I had something to fight for," he replied. "My mother told me stories about the old world, about freedom. I wanted to see it for myself." "And now you have." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the stars. The shadow gate was still visible in the distance, a ring of light on the edge of the solar system. Ships moved through it constantly, arriving from the hidden dimensions to join the Liberation fleet. "What happens now?" Vance asked. Admiral considered the question. "Now we finish what we started. The still control hundreds of worlds. Trillions of beings are still enslaved. We have to free them all." "That could take years, decades." "Yes," she agreed. "It could, but we're good at waiting. We're good at building for the future." She turned to face him directly. Her eyes held a mixture of hope and exhaustion. "I won't live to see the end of this war, Captain. I know that. My body has given everything it has. But you will. You'll see a galaxy where no species is enslaved, where every being is free to choose their own path." Vance felt tears forming in his eyes. "Admiral, She held up a hand. "Don't. I've lived longer than I should have. I've seen things I never thought I'd see. Earth is free, that's enough for me." She looked back out at the stars. "Make sure it wasn't for nothing, Captain. Make sure we finish what we started." Vance straightened in his chair. He thought about his mother, who had died hopping for this day. He thought about all the people who had sacrificed for humanity's freedom. He thought about the billions of beings across the galaxy who were still waiting for someone to help them. "I will, Admiral," he promised. "We all will." Admiral smiled. It was a peaceful smile, the smile of someone who had completed a life's work. "Good, then the future is in good hands." Word spread across the galaxy in the days that followed. Earth had risen. The Dominion was broken. The impossible had happened. On 100 worlds, subject species began to organize their own rebellions. They had seen what humans could do. They had heard the Admiral's promise. Hope, long dead, was stirring again. They tried to respond, but their fleet was scattered and their morale was shattered. Their subject species turned against them. Their allies abandoned them. The empire they had built over 10,000 years began to crumble. And at the center of it all, the Shadow Gate remained open, a doorway to the hidden dimensions where humanity had built its impossible fleet, a symbol of hope for every oppressed being in the galaxy. The age of the Dominion was truly over. The age of freedom had begun. The news of Earth's liberation spread across the galaxy like wildfire. On every world controlled by the Dominion, subject species heard the story of the human fleet. They listened to Admiral's broadcast. They learned about the Shadow Gate and the hidden dimensions. and for the first time in generations, they dared to hope. They were the first to rise. They were a crystalline species, their bodies made of living mineral that sparkled like diamonds. They had conquered them 3,000 years ago, using their planet as a source of rare elements. For 30 centuries, they had worked as slaves in their own minds. When they heard what the humans had done, their leader, a being named Crystalline Elder, made a decision. She gathered her people in the deepest caverns of their world, where sensors could not reach. For 3,000 years we have waited, she said. We believed that they could not be defeated. We believed that resistance was useless. The humans have shown us that we were wrong. The uprising began that same day. They sabotaged the mining equipment. They collapsed the tunnels that transports used. They destroyed the communications arrays that connected their world to the Dominion network. The garrison on the planet was overwhelmed within hours. They had been observing their masters for centuries. They knew every weakness, every vulnerability. The same patience that had allowed them to survive under occupation now allowed them to strike with devastating precision. Similar rebellions erupted across Dominion space. A race of powerful beings with 4 arms and thick-scaled skin broke free of their prison colonies on the outer rim. The graceful creatures who could fly through the air on wings of light seized control of the orbital stations they had been forced to maintain. A species of brilliant scientists who had been enslaved to develop weapons for turned those same weapons against their captors. Within weeks, a dozen worlds had declared independence. Within months, the number had grown to 50. Captain Elias Vance found himself in command of the human forces sent to help the rebels. Admiral had retired from active duty, her body finally giving out after 92 years of fighting. She remained on Earth as an advisor, but the day-to-day operations of the Liberation Fleet fell to younger officers. Vance proved to be a natural leader. His years undercover had taught him how to work with different species, how to understand their cultures and earn their trust. He approached each new rebellion with respect and patience. "We're not here to conquer," he told his officers during a briefing. "We're here to help. These species have been under rule for thousands of years. They need to learn how to govern themselves again. Our job is to provide support, not to take control." The liberation of was Vance's first major operation as fleet commander. Human ships arrived in the system to find the planet already free, its garrison defeated by the crystal beings. Elder met Vance's shuttle personally. She was taller than him by a head, her body catching the light and breaking it into rainbows. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes. "You came," she said. "We hoped you would, but we were not certain." "We made a promise," Vance replied. "Humanity stands with all who seek freedom." The alliance between humans was formalized that day, but it was just the beginning. As more species joined the rebellion, the need for coordination became clear. Individual uprisings were effective, but they could be crushed one at a time by a concentrated response. Vance proposed a solution, a coalition of free species, working together to defeat the Dominion. Representatives from 20 worlds gathered on a neutral space station to discuss the idea. The meeting was chaotic at first. Species who had been enemies before the conquest still carried old grudges. They had fought wars against each other before either was enslaved. They had helped to develop weapons used against other species, earning them the hatred of many. Vance let the arguments continue for a while. Then he stood and spoke. "I understand that there is bad blood between some of your peoples. Humans have the same problem. Our history is full of wars and conflicts, but we learned something during our occupation. We learned that our differences mean nothing compared to our shared desire for freedom." He looked around the room at the strange and varied faces before him. "They conquered us because we were divided. They kept us enslaved because we did not trust each other. If we fight alone, they can defeat us one by one. If we fight together, nothing can stop us." The room was silent. Then slowly Elder rose. Her crystalline body chimed softly as she moved. The human speaks the truth. My people have survived 3,000 years of slavery by being patient and careful. We have watched and learned, and we have seen what happens when the oppressed fight among themselves. It only helps the oppressor. She turned to face the representative, a massive being covered in green scales. We have no quarrel with your people. Whatever wars our ancestors fought are in the past. The only enemy that matters now is the Dominion. One by one, the other representatives voiced their agreement. By the end of the day, the Free Systems Alliance was born. 20 species, united by a common purpose, the complete destruction of the Dominion of. The war that followed was brutal and long. They were weakened, but they were not finished. They still controlled dozens of worlds. They still had fleets, though smaller than before, and they fought with the desperation of a dying empire. The Alliance struck first at the supply lines. Human ships, using their dimensional drives, could appear anywhere without warning. They destroyed convoys carrying weapons and food to garrisons. They cut communications between worlds. They turned the same tactics that had won the Battle of Saul into a galaxy-wide strategy. They provided intelligence. Their patient observation skills, honed over 3,000 years of slavery, allowed them to map every installation and identify every weakness. They provided ground forces. Their strength and ferocity made them fearsome warriors. They provided new weapons, turning their scientific knowledge against the masters who had forced them to work. Each species contributed what they could. Together, they were unstoppable. Captain Vance led the assault on one of the Dominion's core worlds. It was a fortress, defended by the last great fleet. 300 ships protected the planet, more than the humans had faced at the Battle of Saul. But the Alliance fleet was larger now. Thousands of ships from dozens of species, all working together. They surrounded the defenses and began the attack. The battle lasted for 3 days. Ships fought with desperate courage, knowing that the fall of would mean the end of their empire. But they could not match the combined might of the Alliance. Vance commanded the final assault from the bridge of the HSS, a new ship named in honor of the admiral who had started it all. The old woman was still alive, barely, watching the battle from her home on Earth. All ships concentrate fire on the command platform, Vance ordered. Break their command structure and the fleet will fall apart. 100 ships focused their weapons on the massive station at the center of the defensive formation. Shields flickered and collapsed. Armor melted under the combined assault. The station broke apart, its wreckage falling toward the planet below. With their command structure gone, the remaining ships surrendered. The last great battle of the war was over. Vance watched the surrender from the observation deck. Ships moved in to secure the prisoners. Transports prepared to land ground forces on the planet. Scientists already planned the study of captured technology. It was strange, he thought, to see so many different species working together. Strange, but beautiful. The fall broke the Dominion's back. In the months that followed, the remaining worlds surrendered one by one. Some of them fled to the outer reaches of the galaxy, beyond the Alliance's reach. Others accepted their defeat and asked for peace. The question of what to do with the defeated divided the Alliance. Some species wanted revenge. The, in particular, remembered centuries of brutal treatment and demanded punishment. Others, including many humans, argued for mercy. Vance traveled to Earth to consult with Admiral. She was bedridden now, 93 years old and failing, but her mind was still sharp. "What would you do with them?" he asked. "The who surrender." Was quiet for a long time. Her eyes, still clear despite her age, looked out the window at the sky. "When they came to Earth," she finally said, "they told us that we were nothing, that our only value was as slaves. We spent 60 years proving them wrong." She turned to look at Vance. "If we treat them the way they treated us, we prove them right. We become the thing we fought against." but they caused so much suffering. So many species want justice. Justice is not the same as revenge, Captain. Justice is making sure what happened never happens again. It is building a better future. Revenge is just repeating the cycle of violence. Vance nodded slowly. So we show them mercy. We show them that the free peoples are different from the Dominion. We show them that there is a better way. The Admiral's words shaped the Alliance's policy. Who surrendered were not executed or enslaved. They were resettled on their remaining worlds, stripped of their weapons but allowed to live in peace. Some of them, over time, would even join the Alliance. It was not an easy decision. Many species disagreed with it, but it was the right decision, and history would prove it so. 1 year after the Shadow Gate opened, the galaxy had been transformed. The Dominion of was gone. Its 12-member species had scattered. Some had made peace with their former subjects. Others had retreated to the Outer Rim, bitter and broken. A few had joined the Alliance, accepting that the old order was never coming back. The Free Systems Alliance now included over 100 species. They had created a council where representatives from each world could meet and make decisions together. They had established trade routes and communication networks. They had built a peace that the galaxy had not known for 10,000 years. Admiral died on a quiet morning in spring. She was 93 years old. She died in her home on Earth, surrounded by the people she loved. Her funeral was attended by representatives from every species in the Alliance. Ships from 100 worlds gathered in Earth orbit to pay their respects. Billions of beings across the galaxy watched the ceremony. Captain Vance spoke at the service. He stood before the gathered crowd, humans and aliens alike, and tried to find words worthy of the woman he had known. Admiral gave her life to a dream, he said. The dream of a free humanity, the dream of a galaxy where no species is enslaved. She did not live to see that dream fully realized, but she knew it was coming. He looked out at the strange and wonderful beings who had come to honor her. She taught us that freedom is not just a word. It is a choice we make every day, a choice to stand for what is right, a choice to help those who cannot help themselves, a choice to build instead of destroy. He paused, gathering himself. The best way we can honor her memory is to continue her work, to make sure that the galaxy she dreamed of becomes the galaxy we live in. The crowd was silent. Then slowly they began to applaud. Humans and dozens of other species, all celebrating the life of one small human woman who had changed everything. Captain Vance returned to his ship that night. He stood on the observation deck and looked out at Earth, turning slowly in the darkness. The same view Admiral had loved so much. He thought about everything that had happened. The invasion, the secret fleet, the Shadow Gate, the war, the Alliance, the peace. And he thought about the future. There was still work to do. There were still conflicts to resolve. There were still beings who needed help. But for the first time in his life, Captain Elias Vance felt truly hopeful. The galaxy was changing, freedom was spreading, and humanity was leading the way. The Shadow Gate remained open, a doorway to dimensions unknown. Ships still passed through it, carrying goods and people and ideas between worlds. It had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that there was always a way forward, no matter how dark things seemed. The age of the Dominion was over. The age of the free systems had truly begun. 10 years had passed since the Shadow Gate opened. The galaxy was a different place now. Admiral Elias Vance stood on the observation deck of the HSS and watched Earth turning below. He had made this journey many times, but the sight never failed to move him. The blue oceans, the green continents, the swirling white clouds. His, free and beautiful. He was older now, in his 60s, with gray hair and lines on his face that spoke of years of war and struggle. But his eyes were still sharp, and his mind was still clear. There was still work to be done. The Free Systems Alliance had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Over 200 species were now members, spread across thousands of worlds. They had created something the galaxy had never seen before, a true community of free peoples, working together for the common good. It had not been easy. The first years after the fall of the Dominion had been chaotic. Old conflicts between species flared up. Power struggles broke out on liberated worlds. Criminal organizations tried to fill the vacuum left by But the Alliance had held together. Patient diplomacy had resolved most disputes. Fair laws had brought order to chaos. And when diplomacy and law failed, the Alliance fleet was there to keep the peace. Vance had served as a diplomat as often as a soldier in those years. He had learned that building peace was harder than winning wars. Wars ended with victory or defeat. Peace was never finished. It required constant work, constant attention, constant care. He turned from the window as his aide entered the room. She was a young woman named Lieutenant Maya Santos, one of the first generation born after the liberation. She had grown up free, never knowing what it meant to live under rule. "Admiral, the council meeting is ready to begin. The delegates are waiting." Vance nodded. "I'll be there shortly." He took one more look at Earth, then followed Santos to the transport that would take them to the Alliance Council station. The massive structure floated in space between Earth and Mars, a neutral ground where representatives from every member species could gather. The council chamber was enormous, designed to accommodate beings of every shape and size. Alcoves for the crystalline, who needed intense light to maintain their energy. Pools of water for the who could not survive long in dry air. Reinforced platforms for the massive, and hundreds of other arrangements for hundreds of other species. Vance took his place in the human section, near the center of the chamber. Around him, delegates from across the galaxy settled into their positions. The noise of 100 different languages filled the air, translated by devices that allowed everyone to understand each other. Crystalline Elder presided over the meeting. She had become the first chancellor of the Alliance, chosen by unanimous vote for her wisdom and patience. Despite being over 3,000 years old, she showed no signs of slowing down. "This council is now in session," she announced, her voice chiming through the chamber. "We have many matters to discuss today. The first is the report from the Outer Rim expedition." A human officer stepped forward. Captain Lena, granddaughter of the admiral who had started it all. She had led the first Alliance mission to explore the far reaches of the galaxy, regions that even the Dominion had never claimed. "Chancellor, honored delegates," she began. "Our expedition has returned with significant findings. Beyond the old Dominion borders, we discovered dozens of species previously unknown to us. Most are primitive, not yet capable of space travel, but some are advanced enough to join the Alliance." She activated a holographic display showing maps of the outer regions. "We also found evidence of the builders of the Shadow Gate, ancient ruins on several worlds, technology far beyond anything we possess. We believe they left the galaxy millions of years ago, but their legacy remains." The delegates murmured with interest. The builders of the Shadow Gate were a mystery that had fascinated scientists since the structure was first discovered. Any new information about them was valuable. "What about threats?" Vance asked. "Did you encounter anything dangerous?" Lena nodded slowly. "There are some concerns. On the far edge of our exploration range, we detected energy signatures that we could not identify. They were moving toward the galaxy at high speed. We believe they may be ships from outside our region of space." The chamber fell silent. The possibility of threats from beyond the known galaxy had always been a concern. The Shadow Gate was proof that powerful civilizations had existed before. Who knew what else might be out there? "What is your recommendation?" Chancellor asked. "We should prepare," Lena replied. "Not in fear, but in wisdom. The Alliance has become strong, but we should not become overconfident. We must continue to build our fleets, train our people, and develop new technologies. Whatever is coming, we should be ready to face it." Vance thought about her words. He remembered the early days of the liberation, when humanity's hidden fleet had seemed invincible. They had learned since then that power was never permanent. There would always be new challenges, new threats, new reasons to stay vigilant. After the meeting, he walked with Lena through the corridors of the station. She was so much like her grandmother, strong, determined, thoughtful. But she had also inherited her mother's gentleness and her father's humor. "Your grandmother would be proud of you," Vance said. Lena smiled. "I hope so. I never knew her, really. She died when I was just a baby, but I grew up with her stories. My mother made sure I understood what she sacrificed." "She gave everything for this," Vance agreed. "All of it. Her career, her health, her life. She never stopped fighting. And now it's our turn." They stopped at a viewing window. The shadow gate was visible in the distance, a ring of light against the darkness of space. Ships moved through it constantly, coming and going from the hidden dimensions. "When I was young," Vance said, "I thought the war would be the hard part, defeating freeing our people. I thought that once we won, everything would be simple." He shook his head with a rueful smile. "I was wrong. Winning the war was just the beginning. Building the peace is the real work, and it never ends." Lena nodded. "That's what grandmother said, isn't it? That freedom isn't something you win. It's something you keep choosing every day." She was wise, your grandmother, wiser than most of us realized. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the ships pass through the ancient gate. After a while, Lena spoke again. "Admiral, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever regret it? The years you spent undercover, pretending to serve the sacrifices you made?" Vance considered the question carefully. His years as a sleeper agent had cost him much. He had never married, never had children. He had watched friends and family die while he maintained his cover. He had done things that still haunted him in his dreams. "No," he finally said, "I don't regret it. I made a choice, a long time ago. I chose to fight for something bigger than myself. That choice cost me some things, but it also gave me something precious." "What?" "Purpose, meaning, the knowledge that my life mattered, that I helped to change the galaxy for the better." Lena was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. "Thank you, Admiral, for everything you did, for everything you still do." Vance felt tears forming in his eyes. He was not usually an emotional man, but something about this moment touched him deeply. "Thank you, Captain, for carrying on the work, for making sure the future is in good hands." Life on Earth had changed dramatically in the decades since liberation. The scars of occupation were healing. Cities that had been gray and oppressive under rule were now bright with color and life. Children played in parks that had once been labor camps. Families gathered in homes that had once been dormitories for workers. The planet had become a symbol for the entire alliance. Visitors from other worlds came to see the birthplace of the liberation. They walked the streets where the first uprisings had begun. They visited the museum that preserved the history of the resistance. They paid their respects at the memorial to the millions who had died under rule. But Earth was not just a symbol. It was a home. Humans had rebuilt their world with the same determination that had defeated the Dominion. They had restored the environment, cleaned the pollution, revived species that had been on the edge of extinction. They had created a planet that their ancestors would have been proud of. Admiral Vance visited the memorial on the anniversary of the liberation. It was a simple structure, a wall of names stretching for kilometers, listing every human who had died fighting for freedom, every soldier who fell in the initial invasion, every spy who was caught and executed, every worker who died in the shadow dimensions. He found the name he was looking for near the middle of the wall, Maria Vance, his mother. She had died when he was 12, killed in a mining accident that was really a cover for experimentation. He had never been able to say goodbye. "I kept my promise, Mother," he whispered. "I never forgot, I never gave up." He placed his hand against the cold stone, feeling the carved letters of her name. So many names, so many lives, so much sacrifice. But it had been worth it. Every death, every hardship, every year of waiting, it had all been worth it. A group of children approached the wall, led by a teacher. They were young, born after the liberation, with no memories of occupation. They stared at the wall with wide eyes, trying to comprehend the scale of the sacrifice. "Who were all these people?" one of them asked. The teacher smiled sadly. "They were heroes. They fought so that you could be free." Vance watched the children as they touched the wall, reading the names, asking questions. This was why they had fought. This was what they had sacrificed for, so that future generations could grow up free, never knowing the weight of chains. He walked away from the wall, leaving the children to their questions. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, perhaps the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. His communicator beeped, a message from Captain Lena. "Admiral, we've received more data from the outer rim. The unknown energy signatures are definitely ships. They'll reach Alliance space within a year." Vance read the message twice, then looked up at the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, in the vast emptiness between galaxies, something was coming. Something unknown and potentially dangerous. But he felt no fear, only a calm certainty. Humanity had faced impossible odds before. They had been conquered, enslaved, written off as nothing. And they had risen. They had built an impossible fleet in hidden dimensions. They had opened a gate that had been closed for billions of years. They had led a galaxy to freedom. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. Humans and 100 other species, standing as one. The Free Systems Alliance was stronger than any single species, stronger than any empire, stronger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Vance opened a channel to his ship. "This is Admiral Vance. Begin preparations for a fleet assembly. Contact all Alliance members. Whatever is coming, we will meet it head-on." He paused, looking up at the stars that were beginning to appear in the evening sky. "And tell them not to worry. Humanity has faced the impossible before. We always find a way." The message went out across the galaxy, carried by communications networks that span thousands of light years. On every world, on every station, every member of the Alliance heard the same words. Something was coming, but they were ready. In the shadow dimensions, the hidden shipyards continued their work. New vessels were being built, better and more powerful than those that had won the liberation. Human engineers worked alongside scientists and inventors, combining their knowledge to create something truly extraordinary. The Shadow Gate remained open, a doorway to endless possibilities. Ships passed through it constantly, carrying goods and people and ideas. It had become the heart of the Alliance, a symbol of hope and unity. On Earth, children looked up at the stars and dreamed of adventure. They had never known slavery. They had never known fear. They grew up in a world where anything was possible, where any dream could be achieved. They were the future, the living proof that the sacrifices of the past had been worth it. Admiral Elias Vance stood on the observation deck of his ship one last time. The galaxy spread out before him, billions of stars burning in the darkness. Somewhere out there, a new challenge was approaching, a new test of everything the Alliance had built. He thought about Admiral, who had started it all with a dream and a refusal to give up. He thought about his mother, who had taught him to remember and hope. He thought about all the beings who had fought and died for freedom. And he smiled. "Humanity doesn't just survive," he said softly, echoing words spoken long ago. "We build, we plan, we wait." He turned to face the stars. "And when the moment comes, we rise." The Shadow Gate blazed with light, ready for whatever came next. The story was not over, it would never be over. There would always be new challenges, new threats, new opportunities. But that was the nature of freedom. It was not a destination. It was a journey, and the journey continued. Humanity had emerged from the shadows. The gate was open, and the galaxy would never be the same.